Today I will be showing you a few of my tips for entrelac knitting. Entrelac knitting is a form of modular knitting that produces blocks that are knit that are positioned on the bias. It looks complicated, but it's really not that complicated. So I want to go over just a few of my tips for getting the best out of your entrelac knitting to make it look the best that it can look. My first tip is how to pick up stitches. So first I will show you how I pick up stitches along the right side edge, and then I'll show you how to pick up stitches along the wrong side edge. First, really quickly, I want to show you an example of what it looks like to use a whole selvage stitch to use for your pickups versus a half of a selvage stitch. So this swatch was worked using a whole selvage stitch along the pickup edges, and it's nice and three-dimensional. There's holes in the corners. You can really not avoid there being holes, but they're not that visible because of the three-dimensionality of the fabric. This swatch it's the same needle size, the same stitch count, everything, but I used a half of a pickup selvage stitch for my pickups. And in each block, there's a whole column of stitches, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, visible. In this swatch, there's 5.5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5. And you'll notice that these are wobbly looking because it's the selvage stitch. Selvage stitches are typically not at the same tension as the rest of the knitting. So you're exposing a half of that selvage stitch and it looks wobbly, and it's not a whole column of stitches. So to the untrained eye, you may not notice it, and in some other yarns, textures and whatnot, or if you're felting this, it might not be that noticeable. But for a master knitter, we look for whole columns of stitches. And the other effect that you get by using a half of a selvage stitch for your pickups is this swatch is much larger and it lies much flatter. It's not as three-dimensional. And the holes are going to be much more prominent because you're stretching that out. It's laying flatter, and therefore you can see those corner holes a little bit more prominently. So with that said, I use a whole selvage stitch for my pickups. I've worked 3 base triangles and my first side triangle. I'm now ready to pick up stitches along the edge of the first base triangle. So to try to avoid as much as possible the holes at the corner, I pick up within a row or two of the corner. So I don't really want to pick up here, but because it's a little too close in my opinion. So I want the three-dimensionality. So I want the corner to get closed in a little bit. So I'm going to go right here. So there's that hole and then there's that hole. So I'm going to go all the way through the whole selvage stitch to the back, yarn over and pull a loop up. And these are 10 stitch blocks. So I need to pick up 10 stitches. So that's one. And I'm going to try to space these as evenly as possible so that I can get as close as possible to this corner as well. And typically your blocks are twice as many rows high as there are stitches. So, but on the triangles, that number is a little bit different usually. So I'm going to attempt to do every other row. So I'm skipping a row and going into the next one. So that's pickup number 2, and I'll skip pickup number 3, skip pickup number 4, 5, 6, 7, and I'm not going to be able to, so because these are not quite twice as many rows, just because of the structure of the fabric, I am going to back out a few and do every row. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let me back out a couple, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then I'll do 6, and then skip to 7, and then 1, 8, and then skip 2, or skip 1 and go in the second one. 9, that should be 9, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then that will allow me to go all the way down here, right there in that last one, for my 10 stitches. And look how nice that edge looks. If I had gone in a half, it would be a little bit, it would be more wobbly, just like this. Instead of nice even tension, because I used a whole selvage stitch for those pickups. So next I will finish across and show you picking up wrong side, on the wrong side. So I've finished my first yellow block, and I'm going to pretend that I've finished all of my yellow blocks in the first tier of rectangles, and I'm ready to work my way back with the blue, which will have pickups being picked up from the wrong side. So I'll show you wrong side pickups. Now this is a rectangle, so there are twice as many rows as there are stitches. So the every other row pickup should work well. Let's see. Turn the corner. All right. So I want to, so this if I had been working back, this would be a blue rectangle. So now I need to pick up as close to the corner as I can. And I'm going to come in about there. So I'm using a whole selvage stitch from the right side to the wrong side. The wrong side is facing. And I'm going to wrap as if to purl and pull it back to there. And now I'm going to go about every other row. So I'm going to skip a row. And from the wrong side, it can be easy sometimes to look for the bars. So I'm going every 2 bars. But you want to make sure you're always using a whole selvage stitch. So now 2 bars there. 2 bars there. So that's 4. 5. 6. 7, 'try not to split the yarn, 8, 9, and 10 should be, yes, very close to corner, 10. So I've picked up my 10 stitches along the edge of the yellow block, and it looks very nice. So those are my tips for the stitch pickups for Entrelac knitting. Thanks for watching.